Alicia Barrett froze so completely that even her breath seemed to shatter when the ice-cold champagne spilled across her $3,000 suit, each drop hitting the cabin floor like fragments of broken glass. The entire first-class cabin went silent. And in front of her, the black man she had just scolded, the one she was certain was in the wrong seat, calmly held out a business card. Elijah Carter, CEO Horizon Air. Those last two words shot through Alicia's mind like a bolt of lightning, burning straight through the arrogance she had always worn so confidently. But the story did not begin with that shock. It began on a chaotic morning when everything in Alicia's life seemed to be pushed just slightly off balance. 5:48 in the morning. Atlanta was washed in pale sunlight, and Alicia jolted upright with the heavy feeling that she had already lost a battle she never knew she was fighting. She skimmed her schedule, a flight to San Francisco, a preparation meeting for a presentation worth tens of millions, and the dream of climbing one more rung on the ladder of power at the media corporation, where she proudly called herself one of the few women tough enough to survive. The problem was simple. She had overslept. Her $800 luxury alarm clock, the one she bragged about endlessly to co-workers, had suddenly died from a dead battery. Alicia cursed under her breath, launched herself out of bed, grabbed the first suit she could reach, swept her laptop into her bag, and hurriedly called an Uber. "Gerald, can you please drive faster?" She snapped her bright red nails, tapping sharply against the car door. Gerald Wright, a middle-aged black driver with gentle eyes, reflected in the rearview mirror, replied in a calm, deep voice. "We will make it on time, ma'am. Traffic is tight ahead because of an accident." "When is traffic ever not tight?" Alicia muttered. "I'm seated in first class. They won't wait for me." She said it with the habitual tone of someone convinced the world always revolved around her schedule. Gerald simply nodded, but in that moment, she had quietly etched something into the path of her life, a habit of judging people by appearances, by seat numbers, by price tags, by imagined status. When they arrived at the airport, Alicia practically threw her backpack out of the car without even saying thank you. She rushed through security, flashing her platinum card like a badge of entitlement at the TSA officer with a dismissive glance. Others might endure the long line with fatigue, but not Alicia. She believed she belonged to the privileged group who deserved priority. Perhaps that was the biggest mistake of her life, though she had no idea yet. The area around gate A23 was crowded, but Alicia cut straight into the first boarding group without looking at anyone. Jasmine, the young gate agent, looked at her and said gently, "You are our last first-class passenger." Perfect timing. Alicia did not answer. She offered a half-smile that could have meant anything, then stepped onto the plane like someone walking into victory. That triumph lasted exactly 40 seconds, because when she reached the third row, the world she kept meticulously arranged in her mind cracked instantly. Seat 3. The seat she had sat in for years was already occupied. A black man wearing a perfectly fitted navy suit, sitting with the kind of natural ease that made it look like he was born to be in that very place. Elijah Carter. But Alicia did not know his name then. She only saw a man who, according to her instinctive thinking, could not possibly belong there. "Excuse me, but you are sitting in the wrong seat," she said, half commanding, half irritated. Elijah looked up, his deep brown eyes, calm, still like a lake, without a single ripple. "My ticket is also for seat 3A, he said quietly, holding out his boarding pass. Alicia glanced for half a second, then dismissed it with a wave. No, I have flown this route all year. This is my seat. From the row behind, a few passengers began to look up. A raised eyebrow, a soft chuckle, a sense of something about to happen. What Alicia did not see was the slow, knowing smile on Elijah's face, as if he already understood that this conversation would lead nowhere except toward a massive twist waiting just ahead. When the flight attendant Tasha arrived to check, Alicia's pride began collapsing piece by piece. Ms. Barrett, the system has been updated. Your seat is 3B. What did you just say? Alicia blurted out, barely holding herself together. But the decision was final. She had no choice but to sit in 3B beside the man she had assumed was in the wrong seat. A man she didn't know was the head of the entire airline. When the cabin door closed, Alicia was still muttering under her breath, pretending to juggle important work on her devices. Yet what irritated her most was Elijah's complete indifference. He did not react, did not defend himself, did not acknowledge her presence. He simply worked on his tablet with the quiet confidence of a man who never needed to prove anything to anyone. In that moment, Alicia had no idea that every piece of this story was already moving toward collision, ready to explode into the biggest shock of her life. This was a story of arrogance, of prejudice, and of truth revealed at 30,000 feet. She had no idea that the man beside her was about to dismantle the entire world she thought she understood, and that twist was drawing closer with every breath she took. A sudden jolt ran the length of the aircraft and snapped Alicia out of her thoughts, her heart leaping straight into her throat. But the turbulence was only background noise. What truly made her chest flare with heat was the brief glance from Elijah, a light flick of his eyes that made her feel completely seen through. His eyes were not cold, yet they were deep enough that Alicia felt as if she were standing in front of someone with an innate sort of power, the kind that required no explanation, no performance. And that irritated her more than any turbulence ever could. She turned toward the aisle, pretending to be busy, as if acting powerful enough could shield her from being judged. But inside annoyance was spreading through her like a dirty ink stain. She hated losing control. She hated being pushed out of the center. And she absolutely hated feeling like she was not the most important person in a space she believed belonged to her. Tasha returned with her gentle smile. "Miss Barrett, what would you like before takeoff?" "Sparkling water with lime," Alicia replied curtly, without looking up. "And for you?" Tasha asked, turning to Elijah. "Water is fine, thank you," Elijah answered, his voice warm and courteous. What irritated Alicia most was the appreciative look Tasha gave him, as if Elijah were a familiar, respected guest, rather than the man who had just stolen her seat. A soft chuckle came from a passenger behind them, when Elijah thanked the attendant with effortless grace, a natural politeness that made Alicia feel strangely threatened. She hated that feeling, hated that people seemed to like him more, and she hated even more the realization that every pair of eyes in the cabin was drawn to him, not her. Alicia grabbed her phone and turned the volume up just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Yes, I will present directly to the board," she said into the phone, her voice as sharp as a blade. "No, nothing can be changed at the last minute. And remember clearly, the meeting room must be set up exactly as I requested." She spoke as if reminding the entire cabin that she was important, that she belonged to the executive tier, that she had authority. But Elijah did not even look up. Ironically, that calm indifference made Alicia feel like she was performing a one-woman play. as if he was so accustomed to real power that pretending was unnecessary. And that made her unbearably irritated. When Devon, the sharply dressed male flight attendant, approached, Alicia saw something that made her mouth fall open. "Welcome back," Mr. Carter Devon said with a smile. "As always, we have your Talisker neat ready for you, and Chef Marcus has prepared your special breakfast." "Thank you. I appreciate it," Elijah replied sincerely. "No theatrics, no show, no need." Alicia watched as the crystal whiskey glass was placed in front of Elijah, a drink she had never seen served on any Horizon flight, and her standard first-class champagne in a regular glass. A quiet, undeniable difference in treatment. A silent hierarchy. Her face burned. Embarrassment, anger, and more than anything, confusion over why he was being treated like royalty. Suspicion began to creep across her thoughts, a spiderweb crack spreading across glass. She examined Elijah carefully. His suit so perfectly fitted, it could only be bespoke. His understated Patek Philippe, the kind owned by people with real wealth, not those who wanted to look wealthy. His simple wedding band. No showiness, no insecurity. A man confident enough never to prove anything. And that made Alicia uneasy, as if he lived in a world where people served him, not for his money, but for his true position. "Are you an athlete?" Alicia blurted out, unable to hide the curiosity, mixed with unconscious bias. Elijah slowly looked at her, his expression so calm that it felt like he had heard that question 1,000 times. "No," he answered simply. "Entertainment actor. Or business, I'm guessing." "Business." He smiled slightly, but it was the kind of smile that silently said, "You will not guess it." "I fly this route often," Elijah said, offering only that before returning to documents marked with the Horizon Air logo. Alicia glanced at them. Spreadsheets, financial reports, internal documents, but none of it fully registered. She was consumed by one question. Who is he really? Every small movement Elijah made only heightened her unease, as if she were sitting beside a mystery far larger than the tiny world she had built in her mind. What she did not yet know was that the answer to her question would soon upend her entire life. The first twist was coming, and Alicia had no way to prepare for it. No time, no warning, no possible guess. All it would take was a single moment, just one, and the entire illusion of her power would collapse. And that moment was approaching fast, like the low rumble of engines beneath the wings. A sudden tremor swept across the cabin, making the water glass on Alicia's tray shake, spilling a few drops along the edge of her documents. But that small mishap was nothing compared to what came next. The entire glass tipped over, sending a cold stream of water across the important stack of papers Alicia had spent the entire night preparing. The ink streaked, smudged, and stretched like someone had deliberately tried to erase her effort. "No, oh my God, no!" Alicia burst out the sound, ripping from her throat like pure desperation. She grabbed a napkin and scrubbed the pages hard, but it was already too late. The ink had bled into dark purple swirls like an open wound. The frustration that had been building inside her since morning exploded instantly. She whipped toward Elijah as if he were the single cause of everything. "You hit my tray, didn't you?" Elijah looked up, eyebrows slightly tightening in surprise, but still calm. The turbulence knocked it over. "No one do not blame turbulence," Alicia snapped. "Someone clearly bumped my tray while I was asleep. My documents, my entire presentation. Do you have any idea how important this is?" Her voice rose sharply loud enough for an Asian businessman in front to turn around. A middle-aged woman across the aisle inhaled with irritation, and from behind them, several eyes were now locked on row 3. Elijah set his tablet down. His voice was low, steady, not defensive, just clear enough for those nearby to hear. "I'm very sorry your documents were damaged, but I did not touch your tray." His words were light, but that calm composure only made Alicia feel more dismissed. She shot back. "Some people think they can do whatever they want, just because the crew treats them like VIPs. The moment she said it, she saw Elijah's eyes pause for a single beat, quick, small, but enough to tell her she had touched something she didn't understand. Tasha rushed over at the sound of raised voices. "Is everything all right here?" Alicia held up her smudged papers like evidence of a crime. Turbulence doesn't just appear out of nowhere after 2 hours of smooth flying. Someone must have knocked into Elijah, looked out the window. Charged clouds. "We just passed through a dense patch. Sudden turbulence is normal." Alicia let out a short, bitter laugh. "Convenient, isn't it? My work is ruined and you're perfectly fine." Elijah met her gaze, his eyes calm but so sharp that for the first time, Alicia felt a little unreasonable. "Would you like another napkin?" he asked. Tasha quickly added, "I'll bring more napkins and a waterproof document pouch for you." But Alicia did not care about napkins. She cared about finding someone to blame, just to salvage the last shred of power she felt slipping away. "And another thing," Alicia raised her voice again, loud enough for the entire cabin. "The seats are cramped, the service is terrible, and I'm sitting in the wrong seat because of a system error. This is supposed to be first-class silence dropped over the cabin like a heavy blanket." An older man frowned. An African-American couple in the row behind exchanged a look, a knowing one, the kind that said they had seen this type of person before. Elijah remained silent. No pushback, no blame, no added words. His calmness made Alicia feel as though she was screaming into empty air. That unsettling contrast only fueled her anger. "And one more thing," Alicia lowered her voice, but made sure Elijah heard a thoughtless comment revealing the deepest roots of her bias. Maybe if they hired based on actual skill instead of family connections, this wouldn't be happening. The words hit Elijah like a splash of cold water, as if she had attacked Tasha and Captain Reynolds on the basis of race. Tasha tightened a breath, her eyes turning a little red. But Elijah simply looked at Alicia for a long moment. A very long moment. Not angry, not reactive, but with a stillness so deep it was almost frightening, the kind of stillness that warned of a storm waiting behind glass. "Miss Barrett," he said quietly, his voice dropping even lower that comment was inappropriate. "I don't recall asking your opinion," Alicia shot back, full of challenge. Elijah reopened his tablet. "When you speak loudly enough to affect others, it becomes everyone's business." Tasha returned with napkins and a waterproof pouch. "Ms. Barrett, I am very sorry about the incident. I will help you however I can. I want to speak to the flight manager." Alicia cut in sharply. "Now." People around them began glancing at Elijah, as if asking silently, "Are you all right? Do you need help?" But Elijah only gave a small shake of his head, signaling them not to get involved. Rebecca Chen, the lead flight attendant, appeared moments later. But the moment Rebecca saw Elijah, her entire professional demeanor shifted into something close to reverence. "Milordo, Carter, I had no idea you were on this flight. Is everything all right, sir?" Alicia turned, stunned. "Excuse me, I called you, not him." Rebecca blinked. trying to regain her composure. "Yes, ma'am. My apologies. What would you like to report, Alicia?" Unleashed everything at once: the wrong seat, the unexpected turbulence, the ruined documents, favoritism, terrible service. But at the end of every complaint, her eyes flicked toward Elijah, as if he were the gravitational center, pulling every problem toward him. Rebecca listened, but her gaze kept drifting back to Elijah, checking that he was comfortable, that he needed nothing. Alicia caught that look and felt as though someone had thrown cold water in her face. What was it about this man that made the entire crew watch his every breath? Why were they more concerned about him than any other passenger? The answer was coming sooner than she thought. Something was pulling Alicia toward a truth she did not want to face. A drop, a very steep one, might be waiting right ahead. Not just for the plane, but for the arrogance she had carried for far too long. A heavy silence dropped into the first-class cabin like a stone, and Alicia could feel every unseen glance shifting toward her. Not with concern, but with irritation, with judgment. Yet none of that bothered her as much as the fact that Elijah remained completely silent, completely calm, completely unbothered, as if the argument had nothing to do with him, as if nothing she said could disturb even a single nerve in his body. That composure threatened her more than any confrontation ever could. Elijah rose smoothly. "Excuse me," he said, stepping past her. His movements were steady, unhurried, unapologetic. Alicia watched him leave so unsettled she dug her nails into the edge of the napkin in her hand. She did not understand how he could remain that composed. She did not understand why the crew treated him like a VIP, why passengers looked at him with a quiet recognition. And what she hated most was the feeling that everyone knew something she did not. The moment Elijah walked away, James Wilson, the older man in the opposite row, leaned slightly toward her. His voice was low and steady, just loud enough for her to hear. Ms. Barrett Alicia raised a brow. "Are you going to defend him, too?" James shook his head. "I just want to tell you, you're going too far." Alicia let out a short, bitter laugh. "Too far, I am merely demanding the service I paid for. And I am not the only one noticing the favoritism here." James looked at her the way someone might look at a child about to touch fire without knowing it burns. "Do you know who he is?" "A passenger getting a little too much special treatment," Alicia said, emphasizing each syllable. "No," James replied slowly. "He is." Elijah returned at that exact moment. James immediately straightened, pressing his lips together, as if afraid to reveal a secret. A chill ran across Alicia's spine. The kind of respect in James's posture was not given to an ordinary person. It was the kind reserved for someone above him. Elijah sat down, as if he had never left, reopened his documents, and still did not look at her. Not a word. Not a nod. Nothing. And that frustrated her even more, as if he were too important to spare even a second for her anger. Devon rolled the meal cart over. "Mr. Carter here is the special breakfast chef Marcus prepared for you." The plate was placed down with near ceremonial care, delicate cuts, and a warm aroma rising gently. Alicia glanced at her own meal. Vegetarian pasta, loaded with cheese. Cheese, the one thing she had explicitly noted should not be included. "This has cheese," Alicia said, her voice sharpening into a hiss. Devon froze, genuinely apologetic. "I am so sorry. I will replace it right away." "This was a mix-up, Alicia snapped. "I spent thousands of dollars on a first-class ticket, and this is the service I get while he is treated like royalty. Devon opened his mouth to respond, but stopped. His eyes drifted reflexively toward Elijah. Elijah still did not say a word. He simply continued eating. No embarrassment, no irritation, no reaction. That silence felt like a mirror, reflecting her loss of control, and she hated him even more for it. That is why I am asking. Alicia continued unleashing whatever was left of her temper. Who is he? A basketball star? A rapper? Some trending celebrity you are all worshipping? Devon's grip tightened on the cart. A flight attendant behind him frowned. An African-American couple turned their heads, their cold stare cutting into Alicia like ice. Elijah set down his utensils. For the first time, he actually turned to face her. His voice was low, firm, with the weight of a door closing in a vast room. "Minnows, Barrett," he said, "you need to be careful with the way you speak." "I am just stating the truth, no," he replied, his eyes steady on hers. "You are stating what you think is the truth." He held her gaze. Not angry, not loud, but with a conviction so solid she could not push against it. "And those assumptions," he continued, "say far more about you than they do about me." Alicia froze. For several seconds she could not respond, could not breathe, could not think. For the first time, she felt not just wrong, but exposed. The silence between them stretched for a few heartbeats. Then Devon stepped forward with a tablet in his hands. "Perhaps this will answer your question," he said softly. The screen lit up. The Horizon Air logo appeared, and below it were the words that made Alicia feel as if her heart had slammed into the floor. Elijah Carter, founder and chief executive officer, Horizon Air. One simple line. But it was enough to shatter every illusion, every assumption, every belief, every piece of ego she had built over years. Alicia felt the seat beneath her disappear. The cabin seemed to tilt, even though the plane was flying straight. Her world shrank to a single speck of dust. She had insulted the CEO. She had fought over a seat with the CEO. She had yelled at the CEO on the very airline he owned. And suddenly she understood sharply, bitterly, painfully. This was only the beginning. Alicia sat frozen, as if her soul had been yanked out of her body the moment the three letters CEO slammed into her mind. Every sound around her, the engines, the clatter of trays, the whispering passengers, all of it faded into a thick fog. Only one brutal reality remained. She had treated the man who ran the entire airline like trash, the same airline she proudly called herself a long-time platinum customer of. And worse, every passenger and every crew member already knew exactly who he was. Everyone except her, the loudest one, the most arrogant one, the most delusional one. A deep, twisting crack opened in Alicia's chest. She wanted to disappear into the seat, to take back every word, to reverse time itself. But the plane kept flying, and Elijah was still sitting beside her, calm, composed, elegant, unbothered by the fact that she was falling apart. That was the part that stole her a breath. His tranquility was like a massive mirror, reflecting every dark corner inside her. Every prejudice she denied, every layer of pride she had painted over like makeup to hide her insecurity. Alicia tried to speak her voice, trembling so much she despised herself for it. "I did not know, I really did not know, I understand." Elijah replied, his tone as even as if they were discussing the weather. "Many people do not. And I prefer it that way." Alicia wanted to apologize, to say she did not mean it, but any apology now would sound like a desperate attempt to save face, not sincerity. Elijah knew that. He did not look at her. He did not offer her the comfort of a simple, "I am not upset." He just continued eating with a quiet grace that made her feel more humiliated than any insult could. A long silence spread between them, but inside, Alicia's thoughts hammered relentlessly. I called the crew those people. I questioned their competence. I said, he must be an athlete or a rapper. Oh God. Each memory cut deeper, carving into the truth she had never dared to face. She was not the progressive, open-minded person she claimed to be. She only wore progressiveness like jewelry, something pretty to display, not something to live by. But the real blow had not arrived yet. It came in a way no one expected, a sudden violent jolt threw the entire cabin downward. A scream rang out somewhere behind them. Warning lights flickered on. A cold voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts immediately. We are entering severe turbulence." The plane shook hard, tilting up, then plunging down, making Alicia's stomach flip. Elijah instantly dropped his utensils, pulled his seatbelt tight, then reached over to check Alicia's. "Tighten it," he said, his voice unnervingly steady. Alicia's hands trembled over the buckle. What is happening? A loud crash shook the aircraft. An overhead bin burst open, a suitcase crashed into the aisle. An elderly woman lurched forward, her hands reaching for an oxygen mask dangling from the ceiling. Without hesitation, Elijah unbuckled and stood up in the wildly shaking cabin. "Sit down," Alicia screamed. "You will." But he did not listen. Elijah moved with the balance of someone who had done this countless times, one hand gripping seats, the other pulling down the mask for the elderly woman, securing it, calming her with a firm, grounded voice. Tasha rushed over to help, but it was Elijah who brought the cabin back from the edge of panic. In those few seconds, Alicia didn't see a CEO in a tailored suit. She saw a true leader, someone who could stay calm for everyone, someone who didn't lead from behind a polished glass office, but in the middle of danger. Someone his staff trusted instinctively, even without knowing his title. Elijah returned to his seat as the plane took another steep dip. His hair slightly tousled his eyes, sharp and controlled. "Everything will be all right," he said, as he buckled in. "Our pilots are very skilled. They know what to do." All Alicia could do was nod, chest rising and falling in panic. Then the cockpit speaker crackled alive with a strained voice. "This is your captain. We are experiencing a hydraulic malfunction on the left wing. We are diverting to Denver immediately. Flight attendants prepare for emergency landing." The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop like someone had opened the door to let in ice. Alicia turned to Elijah with wide, terrified eyes. "High hydraulic failure." "Are we?" "They will handle it," Elijah said. "No empty comfort, no false promise, just the grounded certainty of someone who had lived through countless crises." At that moment, Devon came rushing down the aisle, urgent but steady. "Mr. Carter, Denver ground team is waiting for your instructions." Alicia was stunned. He said it openly in front of everyone, as if Elijah were the commander of an operation. Elijah nodded once. "Tell them I will brief everyone the moment we land. Prepare the emergency response teams and accommodations for all passengers. No one waits. No one stands by." The words were sharp, commanding, electric. They ran straight down Alicia's spine. He did not shout. He did not posture. He gave orders the way he breathed. Elijah Carter was not a VIP, not a celebrity, not someone who just knew the crew. He was the center of the system. The entire airline moved around his decisions, and Alicia had called him the one getting special treatment. The plane trembled through 2 more violent shakes before partially stabilizing. Alicia gripped the armrest until her knuckles turned white, her breath coming fast. But even in her fear, one image burned permanently into her mind. Elijah standing in the turbulence to help a passenger. No spotlight, no theatrics, no bragging. Just the instinct of a man used to carrying weight on his shoulders. A man others relied on when everything fell apart. And she, the woman who had insulted him for hours, was left with a single question, twisting painfully in her chest. How could I have been so foolish? The plane began descending, wind screaming against the fuselage. Elijah placed a steady hand on the armrest, his voice low and firm through the shaking. "You will be all right, Alicia." It was the first time he used her name. The first time he spoke to her with the voice of someone who genuinely cared. And in that moment, Alicia no longer thought about her career, her image, or her pride. There was only one truth: she was completely dependent on the very man she had misjudged from the first minute. The aircraft plunged into a thick layer of clouds, and Alicia finally understood the real fall in her life was not happening to the airplane. It was happening inside her, and Elijah Carter was the one holding up the light that exposed everything. The wind howled along the body of the aircraft like a sharp warning. A powerful downward pull forced Alicia to grip the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. She gasped for breath, and yet in all the chaos, one thing stood out like a strange phenomenon. Elijah remained perfectly calm. No panic, no hesitation, not a single sign of fear. That calm was what made Alicia, someone who had always been confident, sharp, and in control, feel smaller than she had ever felt in her life. A thud echoed from the front of the cabin. Tasha hurried down the aisle against the trembling aircraft, her voice loud but steady. "Everyone keep your seatbelts fastened. We are approaching landing altitude." Alicia swallowed hard. Her throat was so dry it burned. "Are we falling?" she asked Elijah, her voice breaking all pride gone. "No." Elijah answered, his eyes scanning the cabin, his tone solid as steel. "The pilots are stabilizing the hydraulic pressure. We will land as soon as they find the correct approach angle." "How do you know?" Elijah tilted his head slightly. No bragging. No need to sound impressive. He simply stated the truth. "Because I have dealt with this before." Alicia stared at him. A simple sentence, yet filled with a weight she had never carried in her entire ambitious but hollow career. Elijah Carter was not just a CEO. He was someone who had been present in the worst, most chaotic situations and survived them. The plane jolted again. A young boy screamed from the back. A man whispered a prayer. A woman covered her face, shaking. And Elijah strangely remained the anchor, as though he was holding back the fear of the entire cabin with the steadiness in his eyes. And Alicia finally saw it. For the first time, she no longer saw him as a man in the wrong seat or getting special treatment. She saw someone who was genuinely respected, someone people instinctively followed when chaos erupted. The loudspeaker crackled, "This is your captain. Flight attendants, brace positions." Alicia exhaled a trembling breath. I do not know how." "What do we do?" Elijah turned, gently but firmly, placing a hand on the edge of her seat. "I will guide you. You do exactly what I say." For the first time in her life, Alicia followed someone without a single objection. Elijah leaned forward, his voice low and clear. "Bend forward," hands on the seat in front. Alicia obeyed, her body shaking uncontrollably. Elijah continued, "Keep your breathing steady. Close your eyes if you need to." She closed her eyes. The entire cabin vibrated with the metallic scream of the aircraft fighting gravity. The plane tilted sharply. Elijah held her seat with one hand and his own seat with the other, as though he intended to keep both of them steady by sheer willpower. Alicia felt her hands trembling so violently they almost went numb. But she heard Elijah's voice, deep, steady, unwavering, the single thread keeping her from falling into panic. "You are all right. You will get through this." A roar shook the cabin. The wheels slammed into the runway. The aircraft skidded violently, sliding long and hard across the tarmac. But it did not spin. It did not flip. It only slid. Slower. Slower. And then it stopped. The cabin erupted in shaky applause, sobs, prayers relieved, laughter. Alicia shot upright, tears spilling down her cheeks without her realizing she was crying. Elijah removed his seatbelt and immediately scanned the cabin, not looking for Alicia, not for any single person, but for everyone. That was who he was. Someone who belonged to a responsibility much larger than himself. Tasha rushed to their row. "Mr. Carter, the captain, requests an update as soon as we are stable. Denver ground is waiting for your instructions." Alicia snapped her head toward him. "Denver is waiting for your instructions." Elijah nodded, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. "I need to go." Alicia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Elijah stood unbuckling himself in the middle of a cabin cluttered with fallen bags, scattered belongings, and dazed passengers. He rested a hand briefly on the back of Alicia's seat, not to comfort her, but as a wordless assessment. "You are all right. You made it." Alicia wanted to say, "Thank you," but her throat closed up. When Elijah walked toward the front of the cabin, the entire flight crew seemed to gather, as if waiting for him. Not like an office CEO, but like the commander of a mission handling a real emergency. Ground staff stood at the aircraft door in formation. An operations officer spoke quickly. "Ground team standing by for your orders, sir." Alicia froze. "Sir." The flight crew followed Mr. Carter, awaiting instructions. "Mr. Carter, what should we do first for the passengers? Mr. Carter maintenance is already meeting in the prep room." Alicia felt as if someone had thrown open a door to reveal a truth she was never prepared to see. Elijah Carter was not just the CEO. He was the center of the entire system. Every decision revolved around him. Everyone responded to him instinctively. Elijah stepped off the plane without looking back, but his straight posture, sharp gaze, and immaculate suit, still perfect after the brutal turbulence, made Alicia realize she had underestimated a man she never truly understood. And the twist was not over. A ground staff member approached her row with a respectful tone that startled her. "Ms. Barrett, Mr. Carter has requested immediate accommodations for you and all passengers. You will be placed in the priority group." Alicia blinked, stunned. "He remembered my name." The staff member nodded. "He remembers every passenger with a special situation on the flight, and he ensures no one is left behind." Alicia said nothing. No complaints, no defenses, no pride left to protect. She knew only one truth: her arrogance had just fallen from 30,000 feet. And Elijah Carter, the man she misjudged from the very first moment, continued his work effortlessly, as if nothing unusual had happened. But for Alicia, everything had just begun. Her life had turned a page, and there was no going back. Denver International felt like a massive beehive suddenly pushed into overdrive. Yet among the crowds being escorted off the plane, among the endless announcements, calling for technical teams, among the hurried steps of ground staff rushing to their stations, Elijah Carter stood at the center, like the single calm point inside a storm. No shouting, no panic. No need to remind anyone of his authority. He simply stood there, reviewing reports, asking questions, making decisions, and the entire system moved in perfect rhythm with him. Alicia stepped off the jet bridge, her legs still trembling from the landing, but her heart shaking for an entirely different reason. She was witnessing something she would never have believed just hours earlier, that the man she argued with over a seat was the same person the entire airport was now waiting for. He wants the maintenance team to upload all data to the conference room immediately. Mr. Carter, this is the preliminary report from the cockpit. Mr. Carter, the group with small children has been prioritized for the hotel arrangements as you instructed. Elijah nodded each time without an ounce of irritation. Older executives bowed their heads respectfully. Younger staff hurried to take notes. Everyone treated him like a pillar that held the entire structure upright. Alicia leaned against the wall, watching like a stunned outsider. Elijah Carter was not the type of leader who sat above everyone, as she had often encountered in corporate meetings. He was the kind who stood inside the machinery, touching every gear and guiding everything with knowledge and the genuine respect people had for him. It was natural, effortless, the kind of authority that made Alicia realize she had never understood what real power truly looked like. A man in a sharp suit around 60 years old approached Elijah. "Latest update from the Phoenix team, sir." "Thank you, Greg." Alicia's heart jolted. Greg Patterson, the Chief Operating Officer of Horizon. The second highest-ranking person in the entire company, and he spoke to Elijah like a subordinate in the most natural way. Alicia stepped back, her mind spinning. "I literally yelled at the commander of this entire system. Worse, I did it in front of all of his people." Patterson turned toward Alicia, recognizing her immediately. His expression was not hostile, but the warmth was gone. "Ms. Barrett, I was informed you may need assistance with damaged documents." Alicia gripped the hem of her jacket, her voice small, I do. "But it is all right. Thank God the plane is safe." Patterson nodded politely, but with distance. That slight difference told Alicia the truth. The consequences of her behavior would not vanish just because she now knew who Elijah was. No one needed to say it. Everyone already knew. Another staff member approached and handed Alicia her hotel voucher baggage information and new flight arrangements. "Ms. Barrett, Mr. Carter instructed us to prioritize you in the support group." She froze. "He still remembers me," the staff member nodded with a small smile. "Mr. Carter remembers every passenger with special circumstances." Alicia bowed her head in thanks, but the emotion in her chest was suffocating. How could a man who had just handled an emergency landing, protected hundreds of passengers, coordinated an entire airport response, still remember her? The same woman who had insulted him repeatedly. His kindness made her shame burn hotter. But the humiliation was not over. As Alicia passed the exclusive Horizon lounge set up for passengers from the flight, she heard the whispers. "That is her." She sat next to Mr. Carter, then started yelling. She thought he was someone else, a celebrity or an athlete or something. Judging a person by appearance, and yet Mr. Carter still helped her during landing. Unbelievable how kind that man is. Alicia tried to walk faster, but every whisper felt like a tiny blade shaving off pieces of her pride. She wondered, how have I lived my whole life to become the kind of person people whisper about after one moment reveals who I really am? She sank into a quiet corner, trying to steady her breathing, but her mind felt heavy as stone. And then Elijah entered the room. No fanfare, no announcement, but like gravity shifting, everyone turned to look. The crew stood straighter. Ground staff adjusted their uniforms. Greg Patterson handed him a tablet. Elijah nodded to the room before speaking, his voice deep, clear, powerful, but warm. "Thank you all for staying calm through a difficult situation. I want every passenger properly taken care of. No one should be left behind. Anyone who needs to travel for work will be placed in the priority list. Anyone without accommodation will be assigned a hotel immediately. Everyone today has done a remarkable job." The room fell silent. Then a soft wave of applause spread out. Alicia watched him, feeling the painful tightness in her chest grow heavier. He did not look in her direction, but somehow that made her feel even smaller. That man is the kind of leader I have never encountered in my entire life. Not the type who treats employees as tools, not the type who flaunts authority. Elijah led through action, through calm in chaos, through placing everyone's safety before his own. She suddenly wondered, what standards have I been using to judge myself all these years, to ever believe I was the progressive one? After some time, the lounge thinned out. Alicia remained seated, gripping her bag tightly. She knew what she had to do, not to salvage her reputation, not to seek forgiveness, but because the last piece of self-respect inside her demanded it in order to finally wake up. She stood heart pounding and walked toward Elijah, who was reviewing reports with his senior team. She stopped a few steps behind him, unwilling to interrupt. Just waiting for him to finish. Waiting for the moment to say something she had avoided her whole life because honesty exposed her weakness. When Elijah finally turned, his eyes met hers, calm, not angry, not judgmental. Alicia drew a deep breath. "Mr. Carter, I would like to speak with you." "All right," Elijah said, his voice neither harsh nor gentle. "Let us talk privately." Alicia followed him each step, feeling heavier than the last. She knew this conversation would determine many things. Perhaps her dignity, perhaps her career, perhaps the way she would view herself for the rest of her life. But whatever it was, she could not run from it anymore. Because at 30,000 feet, the truth had been revealed, and Alicia Barrett had hit the bottom of her arrogance. Now began the climb back up a journey she did not yet know would change her entire life. Alicia followed Elijah out of the lounge, each step feeling like she was stepping on the shadow of her own arrogance. The hallway leading to Horizon's temporary operations room in Denver was long and coldly lit, the lights reflecting off glass walls that made her feel as though she was walking into a place meant for people far more important than her. Elijah stopped at a small conference room with frosted glass, soundproof walls, a light wooden table, and sleek black chairs. Not luxurious, but solemn. He stood at the head of the table. He did not sit, and he did not invite Alicia to sit. The room felt bigger, quieter, as if even the air was waiting for something significant to happen. "You wanted to talk?" Elijah began, his voice low, but not cold. Alicia stood across from him, her hands clasped tightly, her scalp pulled so tense she felt her hair might stand on end. "I want to apologize." Elijah said nothing. No nod. No gesture to continue. He simply looked at her, as though he was trying to see into the deepest layer of her, where an apology would either be genuinely rooted or crumble into performance. Alicia inhaled hard. "I know I behaved poorly. I was?" Elijah lifted a hand gently to stop her. "Ms. Barrett, before you continue, I want to ask you something." Alicia swallowed and nodded. If I were not the CEO, Elijah said, slowly, each word falling heavily onto the table, would you still apologize? Alicia felt something collapse in her chest, soft and painful. Such a simple question, yet it pierced the exact place she feared most. The truth. Elijah continued, his voice, not harsh, only honest, in a way that left no place to hide. You were upset about the wrong seat, the wrong meal, the wrong procedure. I understand that. But the way you spoke to me and to the crew. He paused, looked at her. Do you think you would have reacted the same if I were someone else? Someone white, someone younger, someone who looked more like the position you imagined? Alicia lowered her head, her eyes burning. I did not mean to judge anyone, I know, Elijah said. But his eyes told her something else. You did, even if you did not see it. The silence that filled the room was deep, cool, not suffocating, but challenging. Elijah rested lightly against the table, arms folded. I am not judging you, Alicia. I have experienced this many times. Far too many. Alicia looked up. You mean because I assumed you were an athlete, an entertainer, or a passenger who did not belong in first class? Elijah said quietly, but with the precision of a sharp blade. Alicia felt heat crawl across her entire body. He was not raising his voice, but his words echoed from inside her. Elijah continued, not attacking, just stating facts with the calm of someone who had endured it his entire life. When I first started working, people said I didn't look like a management. When I started my first company, investors asked if I really understood the complexities of aviation. When I acquired Horizon, some suggested I take a lower title to avoid confusion. He looked at her again. You are not the first person to look at me and try to guess who I must be. You are simply the one who said it out loud. Alicia closed her eyes. Her chest tightened painfully. I was wrong, she whispered, barely audible. I was very wrong. Yes, Elijah said, not sugarcoating it. But that kind of wrong is not impossible to fix. Alicia opened her eyes. Elijah did not look at her like someone who had failed. He looked at her like someone who could choose to be better. Miss Barrett, he said slowly, everyone has bad days. But we are responsible for the words we choose, especially when we are under pressure. Alicia felt her eyes sting. Part shame, part something unfamiliar, the feeling of being corrected without being crushed. Elijah exhaled, as though this was something he had said thousands of times to employees, partners, and other leaders. Not in anger, not in scorn, but in concern. I do not want you to apologize to me, Elijah said. I want you to understand why you need to. Alicia nodded for the first time, without her usual defensive instinct. Because I used my privilege to judge others. I assumed things based on appearance. I thought my position allowed me to speak that way. And Elijah prompted, gently urging her to dig deeper. And Alicia's voice trembled. But she forced herself to continue, honest down to the bone. I said things that if someone else said them in another situation, I would call bias. Or worse, discrimination. Elijah nodded. No triumphant smile, no smugness, just acknowledgement that she had finally reached the truth. So he asked, what do you intend to do with that realization? Alicia took a deep breath. I want to relearn how to see people, from the beginning. Elijah was silent for a few seconds. Then he pulled out a chair, sat down, and for the first time since they met, he invited her to sit with him. Alicia sat feeling as though she had stepped through an important doorway, moving from judgment into dialogue. Elijah said, I do not need big promises. I need to see change in action. Alicia nodded firmly. I understand. Good. He rose. For now, you should rest. You still have a presentation tomorrow. Alicia let out a small, embarrassed laugh. If I still have a job, Elijah lifted an eyebrow. I never said you lost your job. But You were wrong, Elijah said plainly. But being an adult means knowing how to correct your mistakes. He walked to the door and opened it gently. I believe you can. Alicia rose, heart pounding. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Elijah turned back, studying her expression, not judging, not condemning. Simply confirming. Alicia, he said, this is not an ending. This is a beginning. The door closed behind him, leaving Alicia standing alone in the quiet room. But inside her for the first time, there was no chaos. There was direction, a new truth, and a rare opportunity she couldn't afford to waste, because Elijah Carter did not offer opportunities to those who didn't deserve them. And tonight, for the first time in her life, Alicia wanted to become someone who did. Alicia returned to the Ritz-Carlton Hotel with the rest of the passengers, but her mind was nowhere on the elegant shuttle bus. It was still trapped in that frosted glass meeting room, replaying Elijah Carter's deep voice like an audio track she could not mute. I do not want you to apologize to me. I want you to understand why you need to. For the first time in years, Alicia was not thinking about her presentation, not about her promotion goals, not about impressing the executive board. She was thinking about herself. And what she saw was not flattering. When she entered her hotel room, she dropped her bag on the bed and stood under the warm golden light, looking at herself in the mirror. A 42-year-old woman, successful, confident, powerful, yet her eyes were tired, etched with the sharp lines of a pride that had just been exposed. She opened her laptop, pulled up her slides, but she could not focus. Every word blurred together. She took a long breath and closed her eyes. Maybe I need to rest. But just as she reached for the light switch, the hotel phone rang. Miss Barrett, a gentle female voice. This is Jennifer, Director of Customer Experience at Horizon. Mr. Carter asked me to remind you that your private conference room will be ready at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning for your remote presentation. And he sends his wishes that you have a peaceful night. Alicia held her breath. Elijah not only remembered, he cared about what she needed, even after how she had treated him. She thanked the caller and set the phone down, and unexpectedly tears fell. Not from hurt, from shame, because for the first time she understood what grace looked like from someone powerful enough to crush her, yet who chose to lift her up instead. The next morning, Alicia woke earlier than usual. Denver's cold air was crisp sunlight cutting through the thick conference room glass in long golden streaks. Her laptop open, papers spread out, but the presentation she had brought from Atlanta no longer fit. Not after what had happened. Not after what Elijah had shown her. Not after her own awakening. She looked at her slide, titled Optimization of Premium Client Segments, and it felt hollow, lifeless, detached from what truly mattered, detached from Horizon, detached from the kind of leadership she had just witnessed, detached from the value Elijah wanted to build. She deleted the entire introduction. Her hands shook, but with purpose. She rewrote everything from the beginning. For the first time, Alicia did not write to impress leadership. She wrote to be honest with the lesson she had just lived, to reflect her own transformation, to propose a strategy not built on privilege and hierarchy, but on equality of care, on respect, on how a company should treat people, all people as equally valuable. She finished right on time, her voice steady, but more genuine than it had ever been. When she ended the call, the chief operating officer of the parent company smiled. That was a powerful presentation, Alicia. She bowed her head in thanks, though her thoughts drifted to Elijah. She did not know if he had watched, but she wanted to believe he would know she had listened. At the airport, Alicia felt lighter, as if every step shed another layer of who she used to be, but that feeling vanished the moment she reached the check-in counter. "I am sorry, miss." Barrett Jasmine, the young agent from Atlanta, looked at her screen, then back up. There was an adjustment made overnight. "Your seat has been changed." Alicia stiffened. "Changed, yes. Your reservation has been moved from first class to economy plus, per an executive instruction." A tight pull gripped Alicia's stomach. This was her fear, that Elijah had reconsidered, that he saw her as unworthy, that everything she did was too late. "I would like to speak with the person who approved this," Alicia said softly, her voice rough. Patterson appeared at that moment. "Let us speak privately, Miss Barrett." He guided her into a small room near the counter, closed the door. His gaze was not harsh, not scolding, but sharp. "Is Elijah punishing me?" Alicia asked directly, heart-pounding. "No," Patterson said. "This is not a punishment." "Then what is it?" Patterson studied her for a few seconds before saying the sentence that stunned her. "A test." Alicia's breath stopped. Patterson continued. "Carter does not put anyone into important positions if they only understand the experience from the top tier. He believes leaders must understand the journey of customers at every level. In your case, he wants to see whether you are truly changing or simply saying you are." Alicia inhaled slowly. "If I refuse, then he will know the answer immediately. And if I accept," Patterson gave a faint smile, "then perhaps your new path begins today." Alicia closed her eyes, and she chose. "I will sit in Economy Plus." Patterson nodded, as if that was exactly what he expected. "Mr. Carter said you would understand." When Alicia returned to the counter, Jasmine smiled at her, a smile no longer cautious like last night, but quietly respectful. "Have a good flight, Ms. Barrett." Alicia nodded. No irritation, no demands, no viewing Economy Plus as a downgrade. It was an opportunity, a chance to begin again, a chance to become someone new. And as she walked down the jet bridge, the cold air brushing her cheeks, Alicia understood one thing with absolute clarity. The fall from first class was the thing that saved her. Not destruction, liberation. She had never seen herself so clearly, and this journey was only just beginning. Alicia stepped into the Economy Plus cabin, as if entering a world she had never allowed herself to truly see. The space was tighter, the privacy thinner, the person beside her close enough that their arms might touch at any moment. Yet strangely, she felt no discomfort. Instead, she found herself observing, listening, learning, instead of demanding, as she once did. A young mother struggled to fold a stroller while her baby cried in her arms. An elderly man searched his jacket pockets over and over for his boarding pass. A business traveler tried to close his small laptop so the person next to him would have space. These were moments Alicia had always brushed aside, even found irritating. But today, she saw humanity. She saw truth. She saw how her old self had never understood this world at all. When a flight attendant passed by, Alicia spoke gently. "Can I help her?" She gestured towards the young mother, wrestling with the stroller. The attendant smiled, recognizing immediately that Alicia meant it. "Thank you. If you would like to help, we appreciate it." Alicia stood, folded the stroller neatly, and handed it back to the mother, who burst into tears. "I thank you. No one ever helps me." Alicia touched her hand lightly. "It is all right. We all have hard days." The words came naturally, not forced, not performed. For the first time, they felt true to the person she was becoming. The plane took off. Alicia looked out the small window, not the wide first-class window she once saw as her entitlement. But the sky was still just as beautiful, as if the world itself was telling her real worth does not come from the seat you occupy. When the plane reached cruising altitude, Alicia opened her laptop. Not to perfect slides, not to fix mistakes, but to write something for herself. A reminder: I want to become the kind of leader Elijah Carter believes in. Not someone who leads from privilege, but someone who understands people at every level. A soft ding chimed. A new email. Alicia opened it. Subject line from Elijah Carter. Her heart thumped. She opened the message. The first line blurred her vision for a moment. "Congratulations on your presentation this morning. Patterson sent me the recording." Alicia's fingers tightened on the keyboard. The next line made her throat constrict. "I see the change. Not in your words, but in the way you rebuilt the entire strategy." And then the sentence that made her heart go still: "I am not looking for someone perfect. I am looking for someone capable of change." Alicia inhaled sharply. Tears fell. Not from shame anymore, but from something deeper, the feeling of being seen, truly seen for the first time, after years of hiding behind achievements. The email ended with a simple invitation. "When you return to Atlanta, meet me at headquarters. I would like to discuss a new position." Alicia pressed a hand to her chest. She did not know exactly what the future would be, but she knew one thing: she had to be worthy of this chance, and for the first time she felt ready. 6 months later, the main ballroom of Horizon Air glowed with warm, golden light reflecting off hundreds of champagne glasses. But Alicia no longer cared about the glamour. She stood among her new team, the Community Engagement and Inclusion Division she had been entrusted to lead. Not marketing, not prestige-driven campaigns, but work that touched real lives, supporting small businesses in Oakwood Heights, building cultural preservation programs, protecting long-term residents from displacement. Tasha, the former flight attendant, was now one of her closest partners. Devon, who once served Elijah, was explaining to the group how Alicia's new training model could transform onboard culture. Alicia stood in that moment and felt right in a way she had never felt in her career. Not because of status, not because of salary, but because for the first time she was doing something that mattered. Her phone vibrated softly. A message. Elijah. "Come to the stage. I want to say this in front of everyone." Alicia stepped forward, heart pounding once. Elijah stood on stage, calm posture, deep eyes commanding the room without ever raising his voice. He looked at Alicia for a brief moment, not with superiority, but with acknowledgement. Elijah said, "This year Horizon Air did not only grow in revenue or routes, we grew in values." He paused, then glanced toward Alicia. "And one of the people who contributed the most to that transformation is Alicia Barrett." Applause spread across the room. Alicia stood still. No tears, no trembling. Just a single overwhelming realization: her transformation had come full circle from the moment she sat in seat 3B, filled with arrogance and blindness. Elijah stepped off the stage and stopped beside her. He did not give a long speech. He simply placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes warm and steady. I told you, this was not an ending. This was a beginning. Alicia nodded, offering a small but powerful smile. And I will not step backwards again. Elijah replied softly, I know. When the event ended, Alicia stepped onto the balcony. The Atlanta night breeze brushed past her, gentle and cool. The city lights below no longer represented rivalry, conflict, or endless ambition. They were the lights of a place where she had begun again. She closed her eyes, breathing in deeply. From the ballroom behind her, music floated into the air, and for a moment she heard a voice echo from her most pivotal moment. I do not want you to apologize to me. I want you to understand why you need to. She understood now, and because of that, she had changed. She had become someone the old Alicia could never have imagined. Not someone perfect, someone finally walking in the right direction. A new journey, one that didn't begin in first class, one that began with a fall and ended in growth. A night flight ascended in the distance, its lights blinking across the sky. Alicia watched it climb her heart, lifting with it. Thank you, she whispered into the wind, directed at the man who had given her the chance to truly see herself. And her journey was only now beginning. From the perspective of sociologists and behavioral management experts, Alicia Barrett's journey is not just a story on an airplane. It is a clear demonstration of how privilege bias and narrow viewpoints can blind a person far more than they realize. And it was the confrontation with reality, painful yet necessary, that created the turning point, allowing her to rebuild her awareness, learn to listen, understand, and grow. Alicia's transformation reminds us that progress does not come from the seat we occupy or the status we hold, but from our ability to look inward when we are wrong. If this story offered you something meaningful to reflect on, make sure to like and subscribe to continue following other awakening journeys. And before you go, leave a short comment. See clearer